Well, the funky, happy music started playing. You know what that means. It's time for another Ultra Live show. And again, we're missing one key person, one key circle on this screen right here. And that is our very own Maeve Brooks. Maeve, who decided to make a pilgrimage to jolly old England. Maeve, we miss you. Come back soon. Doing the Ultra Live show solo is interesting because I don't have anybody to yell or laugh at me when I say stupid things. I also don't have my partner in crime. So thanks, Maeve. Enjoy whatever you're doing. I know you were going to Stratford upon Avon. I know you were going up into Scotland and all those other things. But hey, welcome to the Ultra Live show. And with a couple of minutes as we wait for our very special guest to be joining us, I, Andy, wanted to give you, the Ultra Live fam, kind of a taste of a little bit of media that I've been watching. And no, it's not the Obi-Wan show. Obi-Wan's good. Jump into the comments and let me know if you think this is out of order. But I think the Obi-Wan show has been underwhelming so far. I think that there is a lot that they could do, and I don't understand why a 10-year-old girl can outrun four actual adults chasing her in the forest. But that's neither here nor there. We're not going to talk about Obi-Wan. I've got another podcast to do that. Today, I want to talk to you about a show that's actually in its second season or just ended its second season. And it's from the guy who created Parks and Rec. It's from kind of one of the guys that worked on The Office. It's a show called Upload, and it is on Amazon Prime. It is a show that kind of has a very Vanilla Sky approach to it, where there's a lot of like alternate reality, sort of VR. Basically, the premise is when you die, if you're rich, they can send your consciousness to digital heaven. Basically, you inhabit this digital world and everything's perfect, and there's a redheaded butler who's always everywhere, and he's kind of a buffoon. And it's a really interesting show on the surface. And then you start to dig a little deeper, and there's some stuff going on. There's a mystery that I don't want to reveal because, you know, you need a hook. But they just ended the second season, and my wife and I were quite frustrated with the second season. It was good, and then all of a sudden it just ended. And we got to like episode 7, and it was like, what happened? Why are we missing the rest of the show? Turns out COVID obviously happened. I was reading an interview with the main actor, the main character, and he was saying that it was tough to keep everything going in the production, and so Daniels and company just decided that, you know, rather than sort of keep kind of beating a dead horse and trying to move people into in and out of COVID bubbles and stuff, they would end the season with just 7 episodes, and then they're going to come back, I guess, with 13 or 14 for season 3, which is good that they got re-signed. But my recommendation for you is, if you don't have Amazon Prime, I always struggle with saying go give Mr. Bezos more money, but go give Mr. Bezos more money, because Amazon Prime is literally a miracle of modern technology. And number one. Number two, go watch Upload. Highly recommended. Okay, enough about that. Welcome to the Ultra Live show, where we routinely get into weird conversations about digital ministry, about engagement, about what people are doing on the internet. And today is going to be no different. Our very, very special guest, David Swisher, is part of the Ultra Live family. He actually has an interesting background, and I can reveal to you, the audience, while he's in the green room right now, that I was doing a bit of LinkedIn stalking and a bit of website stalking. And this guy, some of the things that I saw published from him, I didn't understand the words, and I didn't understand some of the things that were there. And I immediately then saw his background and saw books and some things happening around behind him, and went, so far.
Oh, it's been a great week. I was in Peru for 2 weeks, and for the last 4 days, I've been catching up on sleep and work.
So tell me about Peru. We were originally trying to have you on a couple of weeks ago, and then I got this very, not sort of cryptic email, just like, hey, I'd love to be on the show. I'm nowhere near the country right now. So how was Peru?
Oh, it was awesome. I've dreamed of going there for probably 20 years.
Really?
Always wanted to see Machu Picchu, and planned to celebrate my 50th on top of Machu Picchu, and then COVID. So I rethought things and decided, you know what? I am going to
52.
go as soon as we can. I'm bringing my boys this time. So
Awesome. That's fantastic.
it
Did
was
you guys
an epic
do a lot of hiking, do a lot of climbing, all that?
Oh yeah, everything from dune buggying and sandboarding on Huacachina to speedboating out to the Ballestas Islands,
I love it.
flying over the Nazca lines, and of course hiking to the top of Machu Picchu, and it was awesome.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks for getting back in one piece. So, David, before we kind of get into the digital ministry game and everything around there, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your history. As I always like to ask people, give me your superhero origin story.
Well, I don't fit the normal paradigms. I felt a call to ministry when I was 16, and um, I couldn't find a definition that fitted me because all they had then was teacher, pastor, or missionary.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not any of those. And I've spent the next 20 years trying to figure out, well, what am I? Well, I am a digital technology minister. I help churches figure out better ways of using multimedia and communications technology.
Interesting. How did you get certified? Like, what's your education background in all of that?
I got a secular master's from Emporia State
Okay.
in instructional design and technology, and then I went to George Fox University, now it's Portland Seminary, to get a DMin with Leonard Sweet.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like mixing things together. I had another year and a half there of K-State, but there is no degree in this,
Yeah.
and this is all new and emerging. But I knew it was needed when I was pastoring a church. I had known the pastor before, and they were talking about how hard it was for their audience to get what they were trying to say. And then I ended up pastoring that church, and the audience said, you know, that pastor just kept preaching right over our heads,
Hmm.
and we never understood anything he had to say. So I thought, okay, there is a communication problem, and that's where I spent most of my focus, is trying to figure out how to improve the way churches communicate.
So, how do you identify what the actual communication problem is? Like, for example, that church, is it that you need to, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but talk at a little bit less of an intellectual level? Is it that you're not using the right colloquialisms? How does that all work?
All of the above.
Okay.
A story is huge. That's the language our culture speaks, but we don't always acknowledge that.
Hmm.
Of course, a metaphor makes a huge difference, but even just understanding the community's local context and what's unique about there. I was a local back in Kansas because my family grew up in Kansas and I had never spent a year there. But they saw me as a local boy, so I could get away with stuff that folks that were import pastors couldn't do. And
Huh.
it's understanding all of that.
Huh. Where do you think we have lost our way in terms of story? Because you're not the first person, especially in a Western ministerial setting, that has heard that. But yet you look at some of the largest churches that are blowing up. I think of Joseph Prince's church in Singapore. I think of, a ton of, so the church I work for, we're technically a Methodist church, and a lot of our sister Methodist churches in Africa are exploding. And if you tried to preach a message there that you preach in a Western church, they're going to laugh at you because it's all about, there's no idiom, there is nothing like that. Where did the West kind of lose that?
I think in our embrace of secularism and particularly empirical reasoning,
Hmm.
the whole the science is almost God kind of
Almost the Enlightenment type thing.
the Enlightenment thinking, we elevated rationality
Hmm.
and we minimize artistic creation.
Hmm.
But what moves people? Movies,
Yep.
music. It's all metaphor, it's story, it's artistic, it's creative. And so there's this whole generation of creatives who are finding alternate sources of gaming, metaverse, other avenues to express their creativity that the church has not really sufficiently recognized.
Hmm.
And the more we can engage and appreciate and include those folks and say, hey, we have a place for you. In fact, we need to reach people who see and think and feel like you. The more we can do that, the more effective we'll be in our communication.
So let's dive into that a little bit. Talk to me about what you have been doing in terms of digital ministry and what you're kind of doing right now.
My first foray into digital ministry was pastoring this little tiny church in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. Seriously, the GPS said, please turn around when
Awesome.
we turned off the main road. And I realized I wanted to get my messages out there because I was preaching to 25 people and I
Mm.
wasn't happy with that. So I put a podcast together, audio podcast only. I'd have to manually edit in Audacity and upload it. And I remember seeing the stats after about a month of this, and I had several messages that went to 250 views
Hmm.
for a church of 25.
Yeah.
And I told our board about that. And they said, no, I don't believe you. And I said, look at the stats. And it wasn't just our missionaries listening, it was people sharing, and it spread. So that really whetted my appetite that there's a future for this. And since then, I got involved at Kansas State University, got involved in the multimedia production team there, did some broadcast production with the community access TV there, and got involved in live streaming. And it's just been a race of how much more can I invest in multimedia and learn, and finding out what I don't know. There's always more that I don't know than I do. But now we're dabbling in metaverse applications at the university, and also in a learning community I'm a part of. So I don't even know where the limits are. It just keeps growing.
So, metaverse application, what does that look like for you right now? Is that just walking around and, hey, I'm gonna build some things, I'm gonna throw some things against the wall, or is that, hey, I'm trying to intentionally create spaces for people?
Well, at my university, we are struggling with the same thing that most universities are struggling with. Enrollment's declining. COVID's done a number on things. The economy, everything has made it a challenge for higher ed. And so we're looking at what audiences are we missing? Who are we not reaching that has needs? And it's clear to us that there are plenty of people hanging out in the metaverse and finding meaning and fulfillment there who probably are looking for advancing their career and don't know where and how to start. So we're setting up a presence already in the metaverse for meeting and connecting with those folks, but also wanting to train our students and our ministry students especially on how do you do this, and how do you do metaverse ministry. And then in the Wesleyan Church, I've been a part of helping church planters figure out how to set up a new church plant in a digital world. And the first one that kind of kicked off the need for that is we had a pastor out in Seattle who was planning to start a church 2 weeks before COVID. And terrible time to be watching. Yeah. But Tim Kirkpatrick was just amazing. He was courageous. In fact, that's the name of the church. But he turned things around, and he realized, okay, we got to pivot here. So this is now a digital church. What does digital look like? And so in the Wesleyan denomination, we've been trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does it look like? And what counts as a church? So if you meet in the metaverse, is it still a church?
Well, and define that, I guess, because most of the people watching the Ultra Live show know that my day job is I am a digital pastor for a large Methodist church down here in Tampa. And we label it an expression of church, but it's never, that's kind of the hip buzzword. But we haven't really had to tackle that question with a lot of our elders and with kind of a lot of the older members, because we also have a large in-person expression. So for a completely Wesleyan-based digital church, what does that actually look like? What are the essentials and the non-essentials?
Well, you were dancing right around the core issue, and we are just now wrestling with this in the U.S., whereas in the U.K., they've been through this before. In fact, my doctoral program with Lynn Sweet, that's where the term fresh expressions come from. We met with some of those fresh expressions pastors as they're trying to figure out, doing ministry in a postmodern matrix, what does this look like?
Yep.
Here, thankfully, our general superintendent of my denomination, Wayne Schmidt, helped work with Ed Love, our church multiplication director, to try to craft what is essentially a church. What core things have to actually happen for it to count as a church. And there are a few things that are fuzzy that we don't know, like baptism and communion. Do they need to show up in person at a physical facility to get baptized, or can you baptize an avatar? Those are things still being hammered out. But the core expressions of what it takes to be a church, meeting together regularly as a community of believers, doing those one another commands, all of those are things you can do fully online and virtually. And I laugh sometimes when I see the critics. I mean, we get a lot of critics saying, of course, you can't baptize an avatar, you can't get saved online, you can't do this in virtual reality. And I laugh because you're communicating through an avatar or through a screen name, and you're getting offended at me. So it must be real. There is a person behind that screen name or the avatar.
I love that. The fascinating thought. I also help out with a completely online church called Lux Digital Church, and
Oh,
it is
yes.
I'm sure you know Lux.
I met Mark. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm one of the dream team there, and yada yada yada. But one of the coolest things that when he and I first started talking about that church, he actually had an intense expression where he said, "Digital church is the closest that we will ever feel on this side of heaven to being omnipotent and omnipresent, like the Holy
Yes.
Spirit is." And that was one of
Totally.
those whoa moments. And so I'm sure you guys are experiencing that in digital ministry as well.
Well, I'm wrestling with that as I think this through for my university because I look at virtual reality and metaverse applications, and I used to think these are a bunch of gamers and geeks hanging out in a cartoonish kind of world, and it's not real. I mean, I dabbled in Second Life
Oh
early
yeah.
on, um, but I've started doing research on how we learn and the immersive nature of virtual reality, the dialogic nature. We can have more authentic and more genuine experiences in virtual context than we do in person. And in
Hmm.
fact, as I look at my own Facebook friends list, I used to only accept people I knew personally in real life, and now I've had to change that definition because some of my closest friends I talk with all the line, I've never met them in
Yep.
person.
Yep.
It's all been virtual.
Yep. When I first got hired as a digital pastor, this is 3 years ago now, I had been a worship pastor for about 10 years prior to that, and so I had been, ministry. Ministry is in person. It is living in homes and groups and all this. But I kept recalling to when I used to play Halo competitively back in
Yeah.
2001, 2002, and all the way up to like 2007, 2008, and I was part of a clan that we still talk, and I've never met these people ever in person, and yet we still talk online, and I know everything about their wives, everything about their kids, everything about everything because of that digital connection. So yes, it has to be true.
And it's not just new technology. I mean, John Wesley struggled with that when George Whitefield was
Yep.
preaching to the coal miners. And coal miners were getting saved. And John Wesley said, I would have thought it almost a sin if it didn't happen at the church, but
Yep.
I see the proof in what you're doing.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, that is a great analogy too. Wesley out there looking for the people with glowing eyes, and meanwhile Whitfield's in the mines going, "Look, they're all glowing. Come on, let's go." I love that. Okay, so we're talking a lot about relationship. We're talking a lot about communication digitally. What led you to Alter Live and sort of the digital engagement portion of all of that?
Frustration. And then
Cool.
to back up just a little bit, I've been doing some kind of live streaming for about 12 years now. My very first one was we had to have a satellite truck to upload the link. And then the second time I did one, we had a TriCaster and about
Yeah.
$10,000 worth of equipment. Thankfully, things have gotten smaller and made it easier. um, but ever since that very first one, I kept thinking, this is one way. We're broadcasting to an audience, and church is not an audience. And it frustrates me because I want to see this kind of back and forth iteration as we get to know each other, and I respond to what you're saying, and then you respond to what I'm saying. I mean, that's the kind of life that needs to happen for church and discipleship to really flourish. And broadcast doesn't do that.
Hmm.
So I have dabbled with GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect, Horizon Wimba, uh, Zoom. I was an early adopter on Zoom, and every one of those I saw better and better options, but never full engagement.
Hmm.
And then Stephanie came to the Shark Tank event in Nashville that
Yep.
Exponential sponsored,
I was there.
and oh, I was like, really, really. And I remember grilling her out in the foyer, and she said, I have to go now. So I went up to her session. I went to two of her sessions, and I asked hard questions, and it dawned on me, she has solved that issue.
Hmm.
That's the number one thing I think has been a problem with the way churches stream online, and Alter solves those
Yep.
challenges.
Absolutely. So, what has your journey with Alter looked like thus far?
Um, Trying to figure out the best places to apply it. We've had several church planters who have already embraced it. Corey Seals
Mm-hmm.
out on the East Coast is
Yep.
one of those.
Yep.
I've drawn a blank on a couple of names now, but there were several we've been talking to about, okay, if you need this great solution, better than Zoom, better than Facebook Live, and you need this, like the breakout into groups or tables, the stuff you wish you could do in person, this is how you do it. At the church where I am involved, I am not on staff. I'm not a paid or pastoral minister there. I'm just an active lay volunteer. But I led a study in experiencing God. And we realized right away we have some folks who, because of COVID, don't want to come in person. And we had a family that was too far away to make the drive, and one that had just relocated to a new community and hadn't found a new church home yet. So we said, well, how about I make my group live? So we had an in-person group and an online group, and just every week we connected to Altar Live, and they were able to participate just as freely with the in-person group.
I love that.
And I want to see more. I want to get to the point where we're using it every Sunday for all of our services, because it really reflects our congregation's DNA. But I am not the sole decision maker, so there are other people who need to be involved in those conversations.
Slow and steady wins that race. Yep. Slow and steady wins that race. What do you say to, and I don't know if you have this in your church, but it seems to be popping up in every church, and it's been less and less and less, thankfully, during the pandemic, but the people that say you can't have real church online where there's a back and forth, that you need to sit and listen to the pastor and that's it. What do you say to kind of that issue?
I would say two things. One, define real church.
Okay.
And for that, I go back to Paul. I'll explain that in just a second. But then also, who says?
Fair enough.
Those who you should not interrupt the ones who are actually doing it. So our New Testament is filled with references from the Apostle Paul saying, I wish I could be with you there in person, but, and he's sending them a letter. That's the very first kinds of distance education, distance instruction. If the Apostle Paul thought it was okay to connect virtually, I think it's okay for us.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that one. I've been stealing the Roman roads one from somebody way smarter than me, but I like that one as well. The idea then that engagement can happen online during a Sunday morning service obviously holds merit. It's what Altar Live has been created for. What do you see, and what, looking into the future, let's take David Swisher's crystal ball out and look 5 years into the future. If you had your ideal church culture on Altar or any other platform, what would it look like?
Well, I will say one more thing on the last thought. Sure. Most of the people who have a negative impression or say it can't be done have not seen it done well.
Yeah, amen.
They have seen a broadcast model with no interaction, or they've seen Zoom done wrong.
Yep.
Zoom can be highly interactive and engaging, but it can also just be nothing more than watching the leader talk for 30 minutes.
I call it bloviating. That's usually what it is.
Yes, exactly. So I see a future rich with media, AI, metaverse applications, where there's all kinds of rich engagement and streams going back and forth, that it's impossible to be involved in all of it. And you have to choose which ones you want to be a part of and listen in. And you are known by and connected by those types of streaming media that you engage with.
Interesting. Where do you land? And this is going to be outside the field of even the questions that I sent you. So stick with me here. But we are in this gigantic Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 transition. Where do you see that landing for the church, the Web 3.0? And I'm not talking necessarily crypto. I'm not talking all that. I'm talking more in terms of decentralizing an internet to the people. How do you see that working?
That's exactly the core issue, is that decentralizing. I mean, that's what Web 3.0 technologies are.
Yeah. And
crypto is, and blockchain is inevitably interconnected with all of that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of distrust of organized religion. Every few months we hear about a minister scandal that's a celebrity pastor who gets taken down, or abuse that gets covered up by a denomination and finally comes to light. And more people are distrusting of the organized church, distrusting of religion, distrusting of Christians. And the only way we're going to effectively reach the church of the future, that's of people who are wading through this and still want Jesus, is if we have a decentralized network where we are gathering and connecting the saints through something very similar to a blockchain. I mean, what really impressed me with blockchain was I saw a what do you call it, a denial of service,
DDoS, yeah.
DDoS attack on the blockchain, a crypto that I was invested in. And within minutes, the entire community knew what was happening, started rallying against it, and stopped it. Not because, I mean, can you imagine if this happened at Microsoft?
Oh, yeah.
It would take a committee meeting and then another committee meeting, and then 6 months later, they'd have a patch for it.
Mm-hmm.
But with a blockchain type decentralized structure, the community was able to see what's happening, rally around it, address it, fix it, and put a stop to it within minutes of the DDoS.
That's fascinating. I had never even, I have invested in crypto as well, as everybody should diversify. I've never seen that happen in any of that. How were you notified about that?
I was on social media and I was seeing the post about it. I mean, there never was a formal apology or we were attacked or anything like this. I mean, I hate those when they come 3 months after it happened. Oh, by the way, your privacy was stolen and you might need to invest in a monitor.
Yeah, you might here. We'll give you 3 months of 3 months of Equifax free or whatever. Like, get out of here. I don't need to do all that. Last question for me.
Isn't this what ministry is, though? Isn't this what Jesus calls us to in the New Testament?
Man, I was literally going to be running down that same path with you on this question. If you had to say more biblical, less biblical on the paths that we're running right now, doesn't what we're doing digitally almost feel a little bit more like Acts 2 church?
Absolutely. And I'll go back to a story on this. There's a video that went viral years ago of this African safari area in the Serengeti where a crocodile had tried to attack this one, I think it was a wildebeest. I don't remember all the details. But it was fascinating watching the herd circle around and ward off the threats while they protected the younger and more vulnerable among them. And I kept thinking, that's the church. That is the church. And now we're seeing technology move to the point to reproduce what we've already been called to do as a body. I think it's awesome.
How old are your children?
My oldest is 26.
Okay.
My youngest is 12.
Okay. So
my 2 boys that went with me to Peru are 19 and 21.
Okay. So you got a big span there. So your 26-year-old vaguely remembers life without a prevalence of social media. Your 12-year-old has.
Telling her, yes. I remember telling her, okay, well, if you want to be on Facebook, your parents have to be on there too. We have to be friends.
And you have to be 13. Oh yeah, no. No, we're throwing that all out the window. But when you look at that large span, and you look at particularly the 12-year-old and the generation coming up behind us, how can we, as ostensibly older people, how can we affect that younger generation through what we're doing, through things like Altar Live or just engagement platforms?
Yeah, mentoring, coaching, talking it through. I mean, she's grown up in a world that it's all pervasive. She has no knowledge of social media. Social media is an old folks term for what today's kids are doing. I mean, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, to them, it's how you communicate. It's how you interact. And my friends are on Snapchat. I'm going to be on Snapchat. It's not, I think I should find a social media solution. They just do. And so good guidance, not only as parents, but also as churches on digital literacy and how you can recognize who's safe and who's not. I'd love to see some pastors and some churches start embracing and setting some recommendations for how you use social media wisely. How not to screw up your life for 20 years by a stupid mistake you post.
I love that. Man, you heard it here first. We need more of that. David, where can we find more about you, about what you're doing, about all of your digital things?
I have a bio on Indiana Wesleyan University's website. You can reach me there. David wildcattech.dswisher@gmail.com is my personal email. Feel free to email me there. And if you want to put that in the chat, that would be fine.
Awesome. We're gonna kind of start rounding the corner here. I appreciate what you were saying there, especially at the end about digital engagement and kind of mentoring the younger people. I guess, do you ever feel in the heart of hearts, in that pit of your stomach, as you look at that 12-year-old and you go, "Oh no, what are we doing? Like, how can I really help you?" Do you ever get that feeling as a parent?
It comes. Oh, yes. And when I feel really honored is when they give me an insight into their world, or they let me say, "Hey, I posted this. You might want to check it out." Like, okay, now I have permission.
That's good. That's called the caring bridge. That's what that is. They're bridging into the old folks' home at that point.
That's right.
My 12-year-old is. I've got an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old, and my 12-year-old. He's Mr. Carefree, but my goodness, when it comes to media, when it comes to all that, he knows everything before it happens. It is shocking to me how he grew up with an iPad in his hand, and he knows. It's scary. Yep. Awesome. David, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate you, appreciate your insight. I appreciate you being who you are.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Absolutely. Everybody else on the Altar Live fam, thank you so much for watching the program. If you ever need anything, grab any of those social links below me or below David right now over there. And you can always reach out at altarlive.com. We love you. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
See ya.